let's talk about one of the most high-stakes decisions a country can ever make. It's the decision to attack an enemy before they can attack you. It's a choice that's just loaded with strategic calculation, moral weight, and of course, profound consequences. So let's break down the ethics of the first strike. Here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll get into the basic question of self-defense. Then we'll look at the ideal rules that are supposed to govern that choice. After that, we'll see what happens when those rules meet the messy real world. And finally, we'll explore the huge ripple effects of such a decision. All right, so let's dive right into the core tension here. On the one hand, pretty much every nation on Earth claims it has the right to protect its people. But on the other hand, when does that act of protection cross the line and become an act of aggression? That's the fundamental dilemma. I mean, think about it for a second, just on a personal level. If you're convinced someone is about to hurt you, are you justified in throwing the first punch? Now, just scale that question up to entire nations with armies and incredibly powerful weapons. The stakes become almost unimaginably high. Okay, so the specific term we're dealing with here is a preemptive strike. And this is key. We're not just talking about a vague feeling of danger. This is about acting against a threat you believe is so immediate, so imminent, that an attack is literally moments away from happening. Now, you might think a decision this massive would just be pure chaos. But for centuries, philosophers and lawyers have actually tried to create a kind of rule book for war. So let's take a look at the ideal framework that's supposed to guide a choice this heavy. This brings us to a concept called just war theory. It's this ancient set of ethical guidelines, kind of like a checklist for war. For a war to be considered just, you need a just cause, like self-defense. Your intention has to be right. You're trying to stop a threat, not grab land or oil. It has to be declared by a legitimate government. It needs a real shot at succeeding. And, this is crucial, it has to be an absolute last resort. Every other peaceful option has to be off the table. And if you want to know just how high that bar is supposed to be, check out this quote. It comes from a foundational idea in international law. The threat can't just be some possibility down the road. It has to be instant overwhelming and leave you with absolutely no time to think about other options. That's the ideal. But what happens when that clean, clear theory smacks right into the real world, into the fog of war, with sketchy intelligence and huge political pressure? Well, let's see how this actually plays out. Let's look at 1967. Israel saw armies from neighboring countries massing on its borders and a naval blockade cutting off its access to the sea. They argued this was a clear, imminent threat to their very existence, and so they launched a preemptive attack that kicked off the Six-Day War. The key here is that the threat was visible, it was physical, and it was happening right then. Now, let's jump forward to 2003. The invasion of Iraq was justified based on intelligence that claimed the country had weapons of mass destruction and that these posed a grave danger. See the difference? The threat here wasn't based on armies at the border. It was based on intelligence reports about what might be there. And this is where the theory just completely breaks down in reality. The intelligence was wrong. No WMDs were found. This whole case is just a stark, catastrophic reminder of the danger of acting on uncertain information, especially when there might be immense political pressure to find a reason for a decision that's already been made. So this brings us to what is maybe the single most crucial distinction in this entire topic. A preemptive strike is about stopping a punch that's already being thrown at you. A preventive war, on the other hand, is about stopping someone because you're afraid they might throw a punch someday. A lot of people argue that the 2003 invasion was preventive, not preemptive, and that blurs a really, really critical ethical line. Because here's the thing, whether it's justified or not, the decision to strike first unleashes this cascade of consequences. The conflict doesn't end when the first bombs drop. No, that's just the beginning of a ripple effect that can spread for years, sometimes even for decades. Strategically, a first strike can be a huge gamble that just totally backfires. Instead of ending a threat, it can blow up into a much wider war. It can weaken the very international laws that are meant to stop aggression in the first place. It creates deep-seated resentment that fuels future conflicts. And it can seriously damage relationships with your closest allies. And then you've got the ethical fallout. It creates this moral hazard. If striking first is seen as a winning strategy, it tempts other countries to do the same. Trust between nations gets completely eroded, and maybe most dangerously, it can lower the bar, making it that much easier to justify starting the next war. And we can never, ever forget the human cost. Beyond all the strategy and the ethics, there is the raw, devastating reality of war, the loss of life,
the families forced to flee their homes, the trauma that can scar entire generations, and the destruction of the very fabric of a society.
So, after all of this, we're left with this really profound and honestly unsettling question. In the search for national security, do we sometimes have to sacrifice the principles of justice? Or does true, lasting security only come from holding on to those principles, especially when we're afraid? It's a choice that truly defines the world we live in.